the Trump administration has finally pivoted to Asia in this term, and it's doing so at the very same moment that it is placing Iran in its crosshairs and failing. We can talk about it later. Failing in its negotiations to end the Ukraine proxy war. Everything they're doing right now is war abroad, and at home it's all emergency, placing the United States in a state of emergency in order to advance a program without the courts intervening. So I don't know, that could segue to Netanyahu meeting with Trump, kind of rushing to Washington last minute, passing over European borders, crossing through Hungary, over European airspace with an ICC warrant over his head, with no one doing anything. A complete insult to this so-called, whatever's left of the rules-based order. And he arrives in Washington with a very clear agenda. Aaron, what were your thoughts on the meeting?
Well, I was particularly struck by Trump endorsing the extremist ultra-right Israeli perspective that Israel should never have withdrawn its settlers from the Gaza Strip. He talked about Israel once owning the Gaza Strip and giving it up foolishly. It was like he said it was a mistake for Israel to withdraw its settlers from the Gaza Strip, which is that's the ultra extreme fringe view in an already extremist Israeli society. Ariel Sharon gave up the Gaza Strip because, as one of his advisors explained, what was his name, Dov Weisglass, he said that we wanted to put formaldehyde on the so-called peace process to stop all this talk about a Palestinian state. So if we pull out the settlers from Gaza and just put them all in the West Bank, they'll basically freeze the peace process and stop all these pesky demands for a Palestinian homeland. So that's so Trump is saying that was too generous to Palestinians to basically remove the illegal settlers from Gaza. And he basically, so he's showing that he's accepting the ultra extreme perspective of an already extremist Israeli society. And then, Netanyahu then, took Trump's lead or cue and just lied through his teeth and said that it's not us that locks in the Palestinians. They should be free to go wherever they want. And by that, he means they should be ethnically cleansed. When, of course, it's his government that's put Gaza under siege for 20 years and counting. And
Trump tossed to Netanyahu here and just said, let's have the expert explain why Gaza's in the situation it's in.
Give people a choice. Gaza
terrible volume.
And any other place, Gazans were closed in. And any other place, including in arenas of battle, I mean, whether it's Ukraine or Syria or any other place, people could leave. Gaza was the only place where they locked them in. We didn't lock them in. They're locked in. And what is wrong with giving people a choice? Give people a choice.
It sounds good. They're just locked in, and we didn't do it. He just says we didn't do it. He just openly lies. And so why don't we just give them a choice? And I was struck by I watched the whole press conference. Not one reporter asked a critical question of Netanyahu. Not one. If anything, they asked him about the hostages, but not the 2 million hostages in the Gaza Strip. But why would they give him a choice to leave? Why is this happening? It speaks to the core logic of Zionism, which is that there can't be a Jewish state in the heart of the Arab Middle East without it committing ethnic cleansing in order to preserve its ethno-religious purity and the demographic advantage which it has basically lost over Palestinians. That's why Gaza exists in the first place. It's just a human warehouse for surplus humanity that can't be inside Israeli-controlled territory. But now they want to actually annex parts of Gaza, create buffer zones, which means destroying entire cities and giving them a choice to leave in order to put what you said is like always been the most extreme solution that we always thought was the provenance of settlers and Kahanists into the mainstream. And that's what Trump has done. He's made population transfer, ethnic cleansing mainstream.
The one critical question I heard, somewhat critical question, if you can call it that, was to Trump when he was asked, do you think blocking all humanitarian aid is an effective strategy? Not like, do you think it's a legal strategy, a moral one, which of course it's not effective. And of course, Trump just ignored that question and no one asked him a follow-up. So that was the one mention that I heard in the whole time of the fact that Israel is still putting Gaza under a medieval siege, blocking everything from coming in. And the US media just treats that as normal, just like they treat the daily slaughter of civilians, including so many children every single day that we can all see on our social media feeds, as totally routine.
Yeah. It's there is nothing holding Israel back from being what it truly is, from showing the world what it truly is, which is what we see in Gaza. The United States is not even pretending anymore that Israel should allow in humanitarian aid, or the Biden administration declared that Rafah is a red line before it allowed Israel to enter Rafah. Blinken was pretending to care about the humanitarian situation of Palestinians. There were fake displays of outrage over the World Central Kitchen killing, in which, an American was killed and international aid workers were deliberately assassinated. Now there's just nothing. The execution of 15 aid workers, medics in Gaza, which turned out to be an on-camera execution because one of their iPhones was found, despite the Israeli soldiers' attempts to bring in a bulldozer and bury the ambulances. That was all dismissed by the Trump State Department as the fault of Hamas, which means go kill everybody you want. 100 or 200 Israeli medics have actually called for the punishment of those soldiers, but nothing from the US administration. So Netanyahu's getting emboldened, and he wants war. He wants Trump to carry out the most important aspect of his agenda, which is war with Iran. I mean, that's what Netanyahu's entire career has been animated by, is his desire for regime change in Iran, for destroying the Iranian state, because it is the one force left in the region which is still sponsoring and supporting resistance against Zionism, when the rest of the Arab states have totally capitulated, most recently Syria, which we'll talk about. And here is his chance. Like, the Israelis believe that there's this window that they have right now where Iran can be attacked, where Trump is still popular and strong, and they have him by the short and curlies. So this is the reason that Netanyahu flew in kind of last minute, and he's proposing his solution here.
And of course, we also discussed Iran. Look, we're both united in the goal that Iran does not ever get nuclear weapons. If it could be done diplomatically in a full way, the way it was done in Libya, I think that would be a good thing. But whatever happens, we have to make sure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons.
What does that mean, Aaron? Like, the way it was done in Libya?
It means Libya gives up its deterrence, and then the U.S. launches a regime change war, and the president, Gaddafi, gets sodomized. That's the Libya model. That's what Netanyahu is calling on. And when John Bolton put forward a similar proposal back in 2020, and I believe he was talking about North Korea, this is what Donald Trump said about John Bolton. What would Bolton, one of the dumbest people in Washington, know? Wasn't he the person who so stupidly said on television, Libyan solution, when describing what the U.S. was going to do for North Korea? Okay, so when John Bolton offered the exact same proposal as Netanyahu is doing, Donald Trump called him out and called him one of the dumbest people in Washington. Can you imagine Donald Trump ever even tapping Netanyahu on the wrist for proposing the exact same model when it comes to Iran? No, of course not, because he serves Netanyahu. He serves the Israel lobby. But that's, when Donald Trump felt the freedom to speak, that's what he said about John Bolton and the so-called Libyan model in North Korea. But that's exactly what Netanyahu is pushing for, and to show again his deference to Israel. He talked about, yes, like after he announced that there's going to be peace talks with Iran, he also continued to threaten military strikes. And listen to how he refers to Israel and their potential role in a U.S. attack on Iran.
But with Iran, if it requires military, we're going to have military. Israel will obviously be very much involved in that. He'll be the leader of that. But nobody leads us. We do what we want to do.
Yes.
With Iran,
so Israel will be the leader of any strike on Iran, he blurts out, but then he quickly corrects himself. Nobody leads us. Yeah, actually, I think people do lead you. I think Israel does lead you because you're taking their advice and you're pushing for war with Iran. And I mean, the problem with Trump is you don't know what is going on there. So yes, there are these talks. That's a good thing. Did the Biden administration make a serious effort toward diplomacy with Iran? No, they didn't. They basically adopted the Trump first term policy. So which way is Trump going to go? On the one hand, he sounds like he's following Israel's lead because he's calling them the leader of any potential strike on Iran. But then also he is talking about direct talks, and Steve Witkoff, his top envoy basically for all war-related matters, is going to speak in Oman indirectly with Iranian officials. So it's hard to tell, but if you go by what he says, at least publicly, it looks like right now he's taking Israel's lead, and that doesn't bode very well for the chances of peace.
Well, I love that he's at least acknowledging that Israel is driving this policy, just as Israel is driving the Yemen policy. Israel supplying intelligence on taking out the top missile guy, as Mike Waltz acknowledged. I wonder if Trump even knew about that policy. Israel's driving it. Israel will take the lead. He's also saying that to kind of comfort Americans. Like, don't worry, we're just supporting Israel and they're our proxy, which really, like, anyone who's paying attention can't possibly believe that. But Trump hasn't put forward the Libya option. I don't know what they're demanding of Iran, but I know what they have demanded in the past under the maximum pressure policy put forward by arch neocon Brian Hook, who was in charge of Trump's policy back in Trump's first term, which led to the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And Brian Hook was on Trump's transition team during his campaign. And that is untenable for Iranians and is a recipe for national suicide. Because not only do they demand that Iran give up its nuclear program, which Iran says it doesn't even have a military or weapons grade nuclear program, but also
U.S. intelligence says the same thing too. They just put out a report saying that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program.
There you go. They also are demanding that Iran give up its ballistic missile program, which is at the heart of its deterrence strategy, its strategic deterrence, as we saw during one of the few times they actually responded to Israeli provocations and unprecedented attacks on their assets and territory. They also are demanding that Iran give up support to Hezbollah and the so-called Houthis, Ansar Allah, and the popular mobilization units. So basically, Iran has to give up its strategic depth. And the whole point of that is just to set the stage for regime change through negotiations. Because then after they do that, they'll fan the flames of some kind of Masa Amini-style color revolution in the heart of Tehran, which was extremely violent. The U.S. media wouldn't report that. They'll send in, dirty warriors, as they did in Syria, Takfiri forces, encircle Iran, and they could set up any pretext for regime change. Iran is not going to be able to accept that in Oman. And what would happen if there was war? I mean, do you think war is possible here? Aaron?
With this group of people, yeah, I think anything is possible. The Trump camp has different people. You have people like Tucker Carlson, and I think JD Vance is probably in this camp too, who don't want these foreign wars on behalf of Israel. But that's not the only people in the Trump camp. You also have fanatical Zionists, and that's who his top donors are. And they do want a war with Iran, I think, and they think they can win. And they've planned for it. Like, Iran does not have nuclear weapons. The U.S. does. And so the U.S. does have some sort of advantage there. And the question is, would they be crazy enough to send ground troops? You never know with these people. You never know with these people. They're obsessed with destroying Iran because Iran acts as a deterrent to U.S.-Israeli hegemony. And when you're a hegemon, you'll do crazy things. Joe Biden was willing to fuel a proxy war. In fact, direct a proxy war, as we recently confirmed for the New York Times, because it was the U.S. military running the proxy war from Germany, and risk nuclear war over it. So just as Biden was willing to risk nuclear war and sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people in Ukraine and Russia, I don't think some people in the Trump camp want to rule out, sacrificing U.S. soldiers for the goal of regime change in Iran. I can't rule that out.
No, we'll talk about this in a second. That's why Mike Waltz is there. That's totally why he's there. And his entire career is the result of Israel lobby sponsorship. And, what I've been hearing in and around the administration is that he has his finger on the trigger, pushing, and has almost gotten what he wants, which is a U.S. strike on Iran, that the signals are blinking red. And someone else who I assume is hearing the same thing is someone you mentioned who's got a little bit better access than I do to Trump's inner circle, Tucker Carlson. I mean, why else would Tucker Carlson have said this if something frightening? We were not on the precipice of something frightening. Whatever you think of tariffs, wrote Tucker, it's clear that now is the worst possible time for the United States to participate in a military strike on Iran. I don't know when a good time would be. We can't afford it. Thousands of Americans would die. We'd lose the war that follows. Nothing would be more destructive to our country. And yet we're closer than ever thanks to unrelenting pressure from neocons, referring to Mike Waltz, Marco Rubio, and the CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and many others around Trump. This is suicidal. Anyone advocating for conflict with Iran is not an ally of the United States, but an enemy. Great statement. He leaves out the economic damage. I think the primary damage of any conflict with Iran at this point would be economic, and that Iran would attack the arteries of the global economy, cutting off the Strait of Hormuz, attacking oil installations, including those belonging to the Axis of Assistance, the fake Arab states that are actually just oil companies in disguise. And the global economy would spiral, and it would all be thanks to Trump obeying his master in Tel Aviv. That can't be good for Trump while he's in the midst of a trade war with China and has a global trade war on pause. I mean, it would seem insane, but, never underestimate the art of the schlemiel. So tomorrow's a huge day. That's the meeting with Witkoff and Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, in Oman. I have no idea what's going to take place there, but it's going to be a defining moment.
Yeah. One other problem here is to even make a deal that can save face for Trump. Let's say Trump wants to make a deal, right? Let's just say that. How do you save face for Trump after he walked away from the deal that was already on the table? So basically, how do you because is Iran going to basically cut off ties to Hezbollah or give up its ballistic missiles as Netanyahu wants? No, right? So basically what you're looking at is basically the same Iran nuclear deal that Trump walked away from. So how do you repackage the exact same Iran nuclear deal while still making it look as if Trump got a win? So if Trump actually wants a deal, they'll have to come up with a way to because obviously Trump's not going to take a deal in which he'll admit that he's just going back to the nuclear deal that he walked away from, that he tore up in his first term. So they're going to have to come up with some kind of creative way to make it look as if Trump's gotten something new. And I just don't know what that exactly is. But that's what is on offer. So Trump walking away from the Iran nuclear deal in his first term has just made it that much more difficult. And then what? And then he has already threatened strikes. He said very clearly that if Iran doesn't make a deal, there will be bombing. There will be bombing on the likes of which we've never seen before. So that's a threat he's made, and he will feel compelled to go through on that threat too if there's no deal. So yeah, these are really, really high stakes, and I just don't know what they can do if Trump is serious about reaching an agreement to make it look as if he actually achieved something.
They're going to target Iranian nuclear sites with bunker busters, with B-2s, and try and confront Iranian air defenses with F-18s. They're not going to be able to suppress Iranian ballistic missile fire and suppress Iran's assets. It will be a bloodbath. I don't know what winning looks like in that scenario. There are hundreds and hundreds of missile silos in the mountains of Iran that the U.S. won't be able to get to. Don't know where they are.